Good morning, everyone. This is Rohan from grade 11. I hope you all are doing well. We are extremely delighted to announce that we are extending the Aajivan lecture series through an online platform. This program will host webinars exclusively for TISP students and invite innovative minds of today who are successful in their respective spheres to inspire each and every one of you. Each session will include a 20-minute interview followed by a 15-minute question and answer session with the audience. During the interview, feel free to post any questions you may have in the Q&A section below, which will be answered towards the end of the session. Now let's move on to our first speaker today. He is an international level basketball player and has revolutionized the landscape of sports and education in India. This Mumbai-based entrepreneur studied law in India before pursuing a master's degree in sports, media, and entertainment law at Georgetown University. By bridging the gap between sports and education in India, our first speaker is living his dream by working on something he is truly passionate about. Thank you, Mr. Kunal Maria, for joining us today.
Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, Krishna, for having me. Thank you, TISB, for having me this morning. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and talk about my journey with your students. So, Rohan, thanks so much for connecting, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. So we'll start with a quick 20-minute interview. So firstly, for those who do not know you, could you give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. So, hey everyone, my name is Kunal Maria, as Rohan mentioned. I'm from India. Been born and brought up in Mumbai. Had originally done the ICSE system of education until grade 10. Because when I was in high school, the 10+2 system, especially in Maharashtra, was not very common within the schooling system. What usually used to happen is that students used to go to a junior college after grade 10. So I was one of the first few batches with the IB system in India, and so I did my up to grade 10 from in Bombay Scottish School in Mumbai, and then grades 11 and 12 I did the IB. Followed that with 5 years of law school in India. But the consistent theme throughout my education has always been sport. And sport at various levels. So when I was in my middle school and high school, primary focus was on multiple sports: cricket, basketball, football. And when I got into grade 11 and 12, that's when I really started pursuing basketball wholeheartedly. And then, post law school, decided to pursue a career, as Rohan said, in sports media, entertainment law. So worked in law firms not only in Mumbai but in Singapore, and then decided to go to Georgetown for my masters, followed by NYU, and then worked at a law firm in New York for many years before setting up my dream project, which is Corvus American Academy. So that's in a nutshell, Rohan, my background.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. So obviously, as you mentioned, you did go through the IB course, and you obviously understand how rigorous the course is. So similarly, even the high school students of TISP are doing the IB course, the grade 11 and 12 students. So in your eyes, how did you handle the balance between the IB and extracurriculars, specifically sports, in your case being a basketball player?
Sure. Great question. There's no magic formula, but I can tell you that, as you correctly said, the IB is a rigorous program. It is quite demanding, but it's really rewarding in the sense that it makes you think outside the box. It kind of pushes your limits. So my advice, in terms of what I did well, and I can always kind of personalize it from my experience, and what I learned the most was, there are a couple of factors that the students I would recommend consider. One of them is your subject selection. I strongly recommend students to select the higher level as well as the lower level subjects depending on your strengths and weaknesses. So in my case, I did HL business, HL economics, HL biology, with lower level Hindi, math standard level, and English standard level. The reason I took Hindi, of course, was quite honestly, the hours that I needed to put on the court, the basketball court, that is, And the amount of time that it took away from me, I thought learning a new language would be really difficult in a 2 year stint. So my logic was that, go play with your strengths. So Hindi was something I had done all the way till grade 10, and so I stuck with Hindi through IB. The next thing is, I would strongly recommend is, maximize the opportunities that you get through your CAS. Creativity, action, and service, I know, are key components of your IB requirements. And I, for example, did tried and focused on as much as I could in terms of maximizing my sport. Um, so even the social service activity that I did, we worked with a fantastic NGO in Mumbai called Magic Bus that kind of promotes sport amongst underprivileged children. And that again helped me kind of stay connected with the sport. It gave me some more time, on the court, training younger children. So it kind of gives you that connect with the sport that you want. Obviously, so action was never a problem for me. I could have kind of, given action hours to other students if they were having difficulties and still managed to meet the IB requirement. And the school was great. They helped us. What we did is we created a inter-school tournament for our creativity component. So again, one of the creative ways that I personally spent a lot of time doing was creatively interlinking the CAS activities to the sport, and ensuring that I can maximize my time. And speaking of time, Rohan, I think I've mentioned this to you when we met as well. Is prioritizing and time management is going to be critical. I know. I'm sure your faculty as well as your parents keep telling each and every one of you that manage your time wisely. And I was in your boat. At times, it kind of seems overwhelming. But honestly speaking, especially for someone who's managing an extracurricular or a sport along with the IB, time management is critical.
Okay, wow, that was really interesting. So I think a few of the key takeaways were time management, prioritizing what you think is best, and again, like you said, doing the cast with items that you're passionate about, and in your case, basketball. So moving on. So again, everyone talks about the pressure of the IB program, and so how did, with respect to your career and where you are today, how has the IB specifically helped you? Like, how has it groomed you as a person?
So, as I said, one of the best things about the IB program is it's critical thinking based, it's analytical based, versus a rote based system, which at least I grew up in India. A lot of the educational curriculums now are changing, but the predominantly the Indian curriculums are built on memorizing and then rote learning. The beauty about the IB program is that it helps you, helps you with your analytical thinking, critical thinking, as well as applying the knowledge that you've learned in a classroom in real world scenario. So when I was doing business or economics, the case studies that you get, you apply what you've learned in a class in a case study, and that was really important because when I came into the IB, when I came in from grade 10 to grade 11. I was of the opinion that I wanted to pursue a degree in business. But, having done business in the IB and economics, and just the way it was taught in terms of applying the knowledge, over a period of time in the IB, I kind of developed an interest in research and analytical and applying of the knowledge that you learn. So by the time I came out of the IB, it kind of helped me plan and say that I want to go to law school. And quite honestly, the IB really was that foundation that really helped me not only in law school in India, but more so when I went to law school in the US. Because that analytical way of thinking, applying what you learn in a classroom in fact patterns that are given to you to be able to, present an argument, that is what the IB sets the foundation for. So I'm really, really grateful to that sense that the IB really helped open my horizons and kind of helped me really plan what I wanted to do from a life perspective, but it taught me certain skills that are invaluable till today.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. So now on to the next question, the fourth one. So do you have, so a lot of the students who are listening to the call today are in either grade 9, 10, 11 or 12. So specifically for the students entering grade 11 and 12 who do not have as much time to focus on a lot of aspects being in the IB, do you have any advice or takeaway for these students?
Look, I think the most important takeaway to each and every one of you students is, there's no one way to get to the finish line. And I think that's something that all of you need to understand really well. I, for example, had certain strengths, and obviously all of us have certain weaknesses. So understand your strengths really well and make that your USP and your advantage. So what I would tell the students is, for example, when you're selecting subjects in grade 11 and 12, think about what your strengths are and plan your subjects accordingly. If you have extracurriculars, do not think about doing it. Quite honestly, the one big takeaway that I would have for students in the IB is, while CAS is a requirement, make it something that you're passionate about, and follow what you're passionate about. So, for example, in my case, it was sport. And it really came across, even as I told you, every activity of my CAS component had a sport element attached to it. So it kind of shows that you're pursuing an ambition or pursuing a passion. Do not, at any given point in time, take away from something that you're good at, or you're passionate about, thinking that, oh, I won't be able to balance academics and an extracurricular. That is not what I believe the IB is set out to do. It's supposed to give you the platform to be able to excel both in academics as well as extracurriculars. So, as I keep saying, there is no one way to get to the finish line. So, a student who's good at sport and who's good at academics must use a combination of both in terms of leveraging it into an application going abroad, because that is a pathway that I realized when I went into the US that exists. Similarly, someone who's good at, let's say a Model United Nations must use that to get into, a college or further their education, using a combination of both the Model United Nations experience and maximizing their passion and effort in that, along with the academic component. So at no given point should you put all your eggs in one basket, which is basically only academics or only sport, because that is not something that universities quite honestly appreciate. They want a well-rounded and holistic education, and that is what the IB is here to give you. So, Rohan, coming back to your question, I think the key takeaway is, understand what you are good at, play to your strengths, and definitely don't think that just because a peer of yours, has followed a particular pathway to get into a top college, that you need to do exactly the same thing. Because certain times what happens, I think the biggest mistake, even for sometimes families and advisors and so on make, is they try to clone each child into following the pathway of another peer. And that for me is the first step towards many mistakes that students make. My constant advice to a lot of the young people that ask me is, what should I do? I said, first try and identify what you are good at, and then, plan your pathway accordingly in terms of what your finished goals are. Because, my pathway was very, very different to someone else in the same batch as me in the IB, someone in the same batch as me in law school. But we both got to the finish line. I went into some of the best law schools in the world. I kind of worked in exactly the space I want to work in, and they're doing exactly what they love doing. So as I said, there's no one way to get to the finish line. Just play to your strengths, and I'm sure each and every one of you will excel.
Okay, great. So now we're just going to move on to the last question. Maybe this is a very broad question. So yeah. So obviously within India we have sports like cricket and badminton, which are thriving at the highest level. But we do see a large growing interest in sports such as football and a lot of sports within India. But youngsters seem to move abroad for their sports development and things like that. So according to you, what could India do better to aid in the development of the young talent available in the country?
Okay, fantastic question. It has so many different components that I want to address. The first one being, that as, from the time I was in high school, your age, to now, the amount of opportunities and the amount of knowledge available to families and students who aspire to play a sport is miles ahead of what it was in my time. There wasn't that overall knowledge about sports being, a business, let alone, career opportunities. It's a massive global business, which is now getting, now India is getting there. We've got so many leagues within our country. There's so many corporates that are getting involved. The government's doing a phenomenal job with the current minister, sports minister is doing a fantastic job spreading the awareness of sport and also helping sport develop. Um, and to your question, Rohan, specifically, I think the interesting parts are that, we're a country of over 1.4 billion people. And, if you have living room conversations every time there's a World Cup, a soccer or a football World Cup or anything other than cricket, the Olympics for that matter, the age-old question comes out in the living room conversation, which is, why can't a country of 1.4 billion people produce 11 footballers? Well, I mean, it's not that simple. Let me tell you that. We have a huge population. We have a fantastic and huge youth population in our country. But the one stat that, having been involved in the sports and education space and actively been, researching, the amount of dropouts of students who come into high school, which is from grade 8 to grade 12, that pursue and are passionate about sport, is close to 85-90%. And so that basically means that the talent pool left in the country after grade 12, after students graduate grade 12, which is high school, is about 10 to 15%. A smaller fraction of that then lands up pursuing it even further and going and representing your country in the Olympics or internationally in competitions. So when you look at that small a base, the number of medals India wins for that smaller base is pretty commendable actually, and that is really an interesting thing. And that is what I personally believed in, and that is what we at Corvus American Academy want to change, because we believe that academics and sports must coexist. They're two sides of the same coin. There is no conflict. A student who wants to pursue academics, and this kind of goes back to my journey again. I wish I had something like this growing up, because it would just give me the right pathway to follow. So, that's the reason why we believe that academics and sports must coexist. We must give students a platform to be able to excel both academically and in the sport without compromising on either or. The quality of academics must be, an international quality academic program. And at the same time, the quality of sports training needs to be something that is internationally recognized and something that you can learn from. So to your point, Rohan, why is there such a big migration of talent happening from India overseas? Let me tell you one thing, that's not uncommon in any country. A lot of the top talent wants to, take it to the next step and go into a system which is better for them to thrive academically as well as to thrive from a sporting competition perspective. And that's why I personally experienced seeing so many students coming from all parts of the world as student athletes. And the word student athlete is pretty fascinating, because it basically means you're a student in a college, but at the same time you're an athlete representing the college. So it's pretty fascinating how those two things get combined when you look at going overseas, especially the US. And there are tremendous opportunities. You, Rohan, know so many of the squash players. Ramit and the likes who've gone into top schools like Columbia, etc., on the basis of a combination of squash and academics. And it's fascinating seeing that journey of Indian athletes. So overall, I think India is at that space today where a lot of you youngsters have that opportunity to be able to excel, both in academics and in sport. There are a lot more opportunities available. There's a lot more advice available. There are people available, specialists who can guide you through the journey, which I wish I had growing up. And I think there is, to your point, there is a shift in focus from, of course, cricket is going to be the firm number one in the country always, because we are phenomenal at it. But badminton, in your case, squash. There is even football now that is really picking up. Basketball, like from the time I was growing up, the NBA was not even in India at that time. Now we have a full-fledged academy in India, which is fantastic. So I think opportunities are available, and there is a shift, and India is on the stage and on the path to become a real superpower in the sports space because of all the initiatives happening at the same time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Let's hope India takes it to the next level really soon. Thank you so much for that phenomenal interview. So now it's time for the question and answer session with the audience, which will be led by Krishna. Feel free to post any questions you may have up till now, anything you may have in the interview, to post in the question and answer section at the bottom.
Hi everyone. So I'm just going to be leading the question and answer session. So, Mr. Maria, the first question we have for you today is someone asked, moving from an ICSE school myself, were there any subjects or parts of subjects or topics that you found particularly hard?
Quite honestly, I get asked this question quite a bit, even now with what we're doing, the migration from one curriculum to the other. And the best way to answer it is, quite honestly, the foundation that the ICSE or SSC or CBSE gives you is pretty solid. You do end up doing all the same subjects. The change is going to be in the way the subject is taught. And the IB, the beauty about the IB, as I said, is the faculty, the lecturers, they teach you a very analytical based way of thinking and applying the knowledge versus a rote based learning and just kind of writing it out after in an exam. So for me, the biggest change was not in the subject matter, but it was actually in the way I just had to kind of adapt to the way it was being applied and the way I was being tested on the application based elements of the knowledge. So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. The next question is, when you were in law school, how were you able to pursue sports with the old mindset with sports versus education?
So I'll tell you one thing. It's in India, unfortunately, especially at the collegiate level, which is way after high school, after you guys have done the grade 12. Sport is not as common to be pursued. But as I said, I had this desire, and in fact, even when I chose the law school, I decided not to go into any national law school. I wanted to stay in Mumbai because my training setup was here. I was at the cusp of making it into the senior India team. So I knew if I kind of make that switch and go out of my comfort zone and my training setup, that I would not be able to make it to the senior India cut. And so it's not easy, as I keep saying. It's not supposed to be easy. Let me tell you that way. The other way, it's supposed to be something that you are focused on, and you manage your time wisely. You understand. There's a lot of self-sacrifice that happens. So you need to understand. There'll be a social event that'll be happening. There'll be 10 social events, let's say, a month. You probably end up going only for two to five of them, because the remaining ones you have to kind of opt out, saying, I need to rest and recover. I need to, go for my training session, or I need to study. So it definitely helped put focus into what I was doing, both in law school. And I'll tell you one thing about athletes that I've come to realize is when they are driven to achieve a particular target, they take everything into their stride. And the beauty is that at least I think all of us, what we do is then we figure out a way that works best for us. So that's what I did. I kind of improvised on my schedule, and it helped me get through law school really well. And then it also helped me kind of reach my targets in terms of basketball as well.
Yeah, I think it shows you need a lot of determination to pursue sports at a higher level.
Yeah.
But what do you feel about the money being spent on sports in India? Do you think it is sufficient?
So that's a great question. I think there are many components to that question that need to be addressed. First and foremost, as I said, there's been a tremendous shift in the amount of money spent from the time I was your age to today. We've got several stadiums that in an infrastructure that the government has invested in over the last decade or so. We've had the U17 Football World Cup for the boys. We have the Girls Football World Cup coming next year. We have had the Commonwealth Games. So we have fantastic stadiums that the government has invested into. And the problem then comes down to the maintenance of those. Are those being fully utilized? What happens is, you must have seen even the Olympic Games in Brazil. Fantastic stadiums built for the Olympic Games. In fact, that's one of the biggest criticisms of such big games that are organized is, once a country invests into building all this, how do you sustain the usage of those facilities the same way before they get completely dilapidated, which unfortunately happened with Brazil. So I think the government has done a good job in terms of investing in sport, and they continue to do so. But in no country in the world is it only the government's responsibility. It needs to be backed by the corporate side. And what I've seen over the last decade is really encouraging, even on that front, because we have so many leagues come up in India now. So that automatically means there's corporate sponsorship, there's corporate investment coming in. On the league side as well, we have several leagues. Yes, a lot of them don't do well, but it means that people are waking up to the fact that the sports is a business and it's a lucrative business to invest into, and so that's pretty interesting to see. Um, and then it also comes, over a period of time, it becomes part of people's culture. So what I've seen in the US and having been based there for a long time and shuttling back and forth is in the US, in Australia, in the UK, in Europe, sports is integrated into their culture, which is the case with cricket in India. But it's now gradually changing with the next generation. Obviously, even younger than y'all, there's a whole generation that's obsessed with football. So it's happening. And like everything else, it's a process. It's going to take a while. So to answer the question directly, yes, I think that I personally am satisfied with the investment that's happening. But it's a walk. It's not a sprint. So we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, I think like you said, India is on the right path, and it'll take some time, but I think we will reach the large stage when it comes to sports.
Yeah.
So the next,
I mean,
yes.
if you look at it, like, for example, with badminton, the amount of investment that went in, it took a while to produce the PV Sindhus and the Saina Nehwals and the likes, so it does take time.
Yeah, this process can't be rushed. So obviously you spend a lot of times pursuing your passion, basketball, and you spoke about time management and prioritizing. Could you give us a day in your life, typically during your high school days, to help us balance with our extracurriculars in addition to the IB program?
So I'll be honest with you, I would not advise you to follow my day. It was a bit of a crazy day, but the day that I have come now to create generation of athletes is something that I would advise you. So let me kind of tell you the differences between the two and why it's really important. So my typical day in the IB used to start at about 5:30, 6 in the morning. I had a training session in the morning. It used to be generally some kind of strength or endurance training. And then come back, pick up something really light on the run because I had to run for my bus to catch the bus to go to school. Then there was a whole block of school where there was very minimal, if not any, sport training. Because in the breaks I used to land up playing, just shooting around, but nothing concrete. And school used to get off. I used to kind of take the bus back home, get back home, grab a light snack, go onto the court, play for 2 to 3 hours. I would say 2 hours of really intense training, and then come back home. And then start churning out the IB assignments, which all of you all know is no easy task. And then that used to go on till really late at night, early morning. So the amount of hours that I got to sleep was not the best. But then now, having traveled, having set what we've set up, it's really interesting because I've come to speak to so many people who are specialists, who kind of specialize in training and developing young athletes, as well as helping them through their education. And the schedule is really well structured. So you have a morning session where you get up, you have a full nutritious breakfast, then you follow it by training. Then you have your academic sessions. Then you have a rest and recovery / conditioning session. Then again, you have a slot for training. And then you have a 2 hour window, concrete 2 hour window for your homework and your assignments. And then you have a decent hour where you go to sleep. So you see the difference between the two, Krishna. It's really interesting because, in every athlete, one of the things I've realized is, as much as training is important, your rest and recovery is equally important. And unfortunately, my high school burnout factor was pretty high because I didn't get that rest and recovery to the extent that I needed to, because I was self-managing my entire schedule.
Yeah, like you said, everyone has their own way, and I think we have to find like the right balance in our schedules.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure your school is doing a great job. The schooling system needs to be there, which supports academics and sports. That is something that I'm a big propagator for, and I believe in. We need to produce a system in which students can pursue, I give a sports example, but it could be music, it could be art, it could be, theater, it could be anything. In addition, while they're studying, it needs to go hand in glove.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need to make sure we maintain that balance. And talking about balance, someone's asked, most people talk about CAS as a compulsion and to do it as an extracurricular. It would be hard to balance time. So, how are you able to balance your time for studies and extras like the CAS itself, not to mention other stress factors?
So, I've lived it like you, all of you are. The CAS can be a daunting task for a lot of people, and it was, trust me, when I was in grade 11 and 12. But as I said, but the beauty about the CAS is that it literally lets you find yourself and kind of customize it to what you feel you're passionate about. So you have to find what you're passionate about. And a lot of students make this mistake is because, you have three of your, like we had a group of 4, 5 of us guys that were really close in high school. And three of us said, you know what, three of them said, let's pick this CAS activity. And then the remaining two guys said, yeah, you know what, even I'm going to pick the same CAS activity. And then what happens is that you land up taking activities that your peers are taking, but that you're not passionate about. And that then takes away from something that you're passionate about that you wanted to and you could have pursued. But then the IB comes in where the time management becomes a problem. So my strongest advice to all your peers, Krishna, is that when you're selecting your CAS activities, think about it from a perspective of what you are really passionate about and how this will help you manage your time and still pursue your passion. Because if you just land up picking a CAS activity because 5 of your other mates did it, then it's going to be a problem because then you're not going to be able to balance. Like if you're good at Model United Nations, you should pursue something that's in that realm. If you're good at sport, then pursue something in that realm. Don't land up doing something because one of your other friends told you to do it. So that's my strongest advice to all your peers.
Yeah, like you said, we have to do things that we feel passionate about. So the next question is, do you have any tips on a healthy lifestyle being a sportsman? For example, during exams, we seem to binge eat. Are there any tips that you have for stressful times like this and on how to manage our nutrition?
So when it comes to binge eating, let me tell you one thing. I love binge eating myself. I'm not going to lie. I think it's something that is part and parcel of childhood. So don't spoil your childhood. I see too many parents nowadays or too many advisors nowadays trying to make children get into I mean, it's good to eat healthy, and I'm a big propagator for it. You must eat healthy, but at the same time, enjoy your childhood. So there should be, a day or a couple of days in a month where you have that break where you can go and, enjoy your childhood and eat, what you feel like eating, what you enjoy eating. But overall, yes. So I'll give you an example. Our swim coaches, both former British Olympians, we were just doing a webinar with them the other day, and we were talking to a whole bunch of swimmers across India. And the one question that came down is that, we're not swimming now because the swimming pools are all closed across the country. So how should we manage our diet? And our coaches were saying that, look, you must have a well-balanced diet. And let's say you were eating, X amount of calories when you were swimming. Now it makes sense to eat the same food components, but a smaller portion of each food component, if you know what I mean. So overall, eating healthy is really important. And that kind of, as I've grown, as I've understood, I keep saying, I wish I had this growing up, the advice around me, the programs around me, that the importance of eating healthy for an athlete is actually as important as training on the field. If I can put it any simpler than that. That's basically my advice. So if you don't eat healthy, you could train all you want, you're not going to make it.
Yeah, I think that's the point that everything needs to be in balance. We have to maintain a healthy diet, like you said. So just the last question we have today. What are some of the challenges you faced, if any, in creating in the first boarding school in India for student athletes, and what do you see for your future?
So I'll tell you, every opportunity presents several challenges, right? And in my mind, the biggest opportunity in this country is the youth population that plays sport but has to give it up too early because of the pressures of academics. Because unfortunately, curriculums across the country do not support the journey of a student athlete, as we call it. So to answer your question, the difficulties are just getting everyone to understand that just because you pursue a sport doesn't mean that you have to give up on the quality of education, that they both go hand in hand and you're actually getting the same kind of quality of education, an international education at the same time as pursuing a sport of your choice. And actually that opens up a lot more doors than people know. For example, to get into colleges abroad, especially the US, the academic route is known to everyone. Everyone knows it. All of us want it. All of us have been through it. But the other and the next best option across the board is a combination of sports and academics. That helps you get placed into top colleges. In fact, I know not many people know that the Ivy Leagues, which every one of your peers and I'm sure all of you all want to get into, was actually built on the platform of being a sports league amongst those colleges only. Today, unfortunately, that's got forgotten and people just look at them only academically, but they were founded on the principles of a sporting division in the US. So I think it's about, and as I said, I want to add a couple of things. Is that the opportunity here is there to kind of educate and be such a big player in the lives of young aspiring athletes who want to pursue both academics and sports and help them reach their truest potential, whatever it might be. Help them get into colleges abroad. Help them get into the best possible system that can help them, pursue their academic and sport careers. And at the same time, it's also about, educating families about these opportunities. So these, I think, are the couple of challenges that we face. But at the same time, it's a brilliant opportunity because, we've seen across the country, there's overwhelming a need for something like this. It's a need of the hour. Because there are too many students, as I keep saying, that give up their dreams too early without knowing that, just because you play sport doesn't mean that you have to give it up so young. You can continue playing the sport and educate yourselves to really get into, some of the top colleges in the world because they all offer and respect that. A student athlete is actually respected. It's a NCAA developed term, not something that I came up with. So yeah, so it's been a fascinating journey and we're looking forward to it. Unfold starting this year, and really looking forward to kind of welcoming our first cohort of students.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kunal, for that amazing interview. I'll just a few things I think most of the students would have got out of this was obviously you did go through the IB and prioritization, time management is extremely important. You were able to balance both your true passion and you had to do the IB as well. So you did get a holistic education while pursuing something you truly loved. And I mean, I think you are truly an inspiration to all of us here because like you said, not everyone has the same passion. In your case, your passion was to be a basketball player and now you're doing something with regard to revolutionizing the sports and education within India. So I think that's really fascinating, but everyone does have their own dreams. So someone might want to be a doctor and someone might want to do something else. But I think it's really important that everyone identifies what they think they're best at and pursue that. So I think that's what I got I got out of the chat and obviously a lot more. Thank you so much for that interview. It was a pleasure to have you on the call today. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Rohan. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you to the faculty. Thank you to TISB. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, Rohan, for having me. It was a great chat. And as you correctly said, my one and only takeaway to every student is, pursue your dreams, pursue your passion. Do not give it up because someone told you that, you cannot reach that potential because the sky is the limit. Do not give up on your passion. That's my one underlying message to every young student or student athlete that I come across is, the sky is the limit. Just keep the hard work and the rest of it will follow.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Maria. It was a pleasure to have you on the call today.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Pleasure.
Bye. Bye.